Hello, welcome to Once the Force of Stars podcast. My name's Phil, of course. I'm joined, as usual, by Dave and George. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Hello there.
Of course, we're now back with our new format. Now, before we crack into the show, just a little heads up. If you haven't seen our video a couple of weeks ago, we talked about what we're doing with the show going forward. Just go back into the channel, have a quick look, and you'll know what we're doing from here on out. So if you're expecting the usual new show, now you know different. Tonight's show to be very interesting. So last week we talked about Empire Strikes Back, of course, being the 40th anniversary. We had a great time discussing it. It was good fun. And whilst we're doing that, we're talking about certain subjects within the film. And one of the subjects that came up was the hero's journey. And it got me thinking about that concept across all of Star Wars. So for our first of the new formatted videos, I thought we could talk about that. So I put it to the guys, and very looking forward to talking about this with you two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. When we started talking about hero's journey last week, I was like, whoa, this is like really throwing me back to like studying days. But also it kind of hits that obviously we really get to talk Star Wars, but we've never really, I know we've got Star Laws, but we've never really delved into like, not film theory, because I'm sorry guys, but we're not a university. Like, to those watching, don't worry, we're not going to make you read books. We're going to mention them though, but it was just something really nice. And even though it was for two, it was different. And we've not really had that, not the delve into stuff. We've gone into theories, we've done our opinions, and we've talked about stuff, but I don't think we've ever had one sole episode where it's like, here we go, here's something, right? I'm kind of nervous because we've not done it, but I'm also really intrigued because with our new show format, it means we're able to do stuff like this. And like I said, any ideas, anything we want to do, the only thing news-wise we've had has been like two little things. Not New Republic, High Republic, and John Boyega's rants today, which I encourage you to have a look at because he's in the right. But no, the hero's journey. I'm excited. Before we get into that, if you're not watching, if you're listening, we're just talking over our social medias on the little Sky Sports news bar. I always call it that. It's never going to get another name. Find us on Facebook at Ones with the Force, Twitter at the Force Podcast, and Instagram at Ones with the Force with underscores between. That sounded a lot better than last week.
Fantastic. Yeah, you didn't butcher it this time around. I'm proud of you, my man. I am proud. But yes, anytime you want to get in contact throughout the show, just leave a comment either on our Facebook or YouTube videos. We will read them and we will go through them as we go through the show and, of course, come back to it later on. And, of course, any feedback you've got about this kind of new format and what we've been talking about, again, let us know. Any subjects as well you want us to talk about, we're now open. We're going to talk about anything and everything to do with Star Wars. But yes, so this is a little subject, of course. So George and myself did both study film. So it's kind of take us both back a little bit to our old uni and college days. But this is a subject again. So George Lucas, when he created Star Wars, this was part of what he wanted to make, part of the old mythology and part of the old ways of storytelling, because it's one of the 7 structures that you can look at. We're going to break down the hero's journey in a very simplified, short manner before we jump into it in the Star Wars format. But we're not going to do a uni-style essay here. We're just going to give you the simple overview and then go into how it affects Star Wars, especially Luke, Rey, and Anakin, as some really cool bits and pieces, and maybe why Star Wars feels the need to start off with a desert planet every single time. But yes, so the hero's journey, if you don't know, is basically how you break down Act 1, 2, and 3 of a particular character, usually as your central character of the story. It goes from where they start out, their call to adventure, their kind of refusal to take it on, meeting the mentor, then going through their tests and their approach to the immoral side of things, going through an ordeal, and then kind of restructuring and kind of resurrection and their return to the place of the origin, but with a new outlook on life and with either something completed or something done. Basically, it's a nice simple structure of from A to B through trials and tribulations. And it does actually, there are quite a few things in Star Wars, not only in the films, but also in the books, comics, and games that kind of show this off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go to technically 88. I was doing a bit of research earlier because, we've changed now. I was just going because if you know Star Wars, if you've seen stuff like Empire Dreams, George Lucas loves mythology. There's no hiding from the fact that he wanted to do a Flash Gordon film, couldn't get the rights. That's how Star Wars was made. Best example in history of someone not getting the rights to a film they want to make. And he kind of spoke saying that I literally wrote Star Wars around the hero's journey. I think it was after American Graffiti, he said I started looking at obviously these films, these books, Russian fairy. I mean, not to again jump into theory stuff. Russian fairy tales is a really big thing for Star Wars. They're sort of like the typical 7 character tropes you find in a film, in a fairy tale, and Star Wars ticked everyone. go back to any kind of theory, anything. George Lucas had researched it before Star Wars came out, while he was doing the scripts. That's why the scripts changed so drastically from the first draft to the second draft. And, when writers completely 180 a story, you rarely have it be the same writer. And you had George Lucas creating a new world. I mean, without going into too much, we know what the first draft of Star Wars was. Chewbacca was dead. Han Solo was an alien. There was I'm not even Star Killer, that was there until filming started. And your Mace Windu, Guardians of the Wills, and George Lucas changed everything. Normally in Hollywood, they'll just get a new writer on board and change things because it's someone else's vision to make someone's better. But this was George Lucas being George Lucas before we knew George Lucas being George Lucas, And yeah, once you bring a bit of theory into it, it just hits you. Yeah, Star Wars has everything. And certainly in the original trilogy, we're going to talk about sort of how cinema's evolved, because I do think prequels change a few things about, and then obviously newer trilogy, sequel trilogy, cinema's a different era, lore, everything, sci-fi, film theory. There wasn't degrees 40 years ago to study stuff like this. Obviously, you can do film school, but not to the extent of every place in the country you can do it. So we've got a lot to discuss. I think this is a good way to quickly leeway into Mandalorian. We've all been watching the gallery at home. So one of the things that kind of springs back to my mind was, I almost said Apollo Creed. Why do I always forget Carl Weathers' name? He actually brought a book on, and there's like Hero of a Thousand Faces. That's the famous book that Joseph Campbell wrote in the late 40s. And that basically is this theory. I'm going to put a graphic on the screen. Sorry, guys, I'm going to show it early. And this is going to be the most sort of in-depth we go into it. But if you're watching, if you're listening, sorry, you're not going to see it. There's something called the hero's journey. It's almost a circle. Obviously, I put Luke Skywalker because we'll discuss him first. We're not going to do it all while this graphic's on, but it's a circle. It's a process that needs to happen. So I'm just going to quickly read over them. We're not going to give you a paragraph per one. We're just going to say that, well, no, I'm not even going to bother saying it. I'm sorry, that's really unprofessional. But if you're watching, we're going to talk through what you're seeing on screen. We'll bring this image up a couple of times. So you've got it for each of the three heroes we're going to talk about. And I think is it a fair way to start talking about Luke? Who wants to go over the lead? Because we're not, the one thing to make clear, we're not just going to sit here and here's a theory, here is Star Wars, here is line one, there line one, line two. We're not doing that. Great comment from Carl. Is this the same concept as the Hero of a Thousand Faces? Absolutely.
Absolutely,
And I'm going to pass over to one of you guys.
Indeed. So for me, I must admit, the interesting part when it comes to Star Wars, not just the original trilogy, but A New Hope itself. Before A New Hope was A New Hope, you actually had almost a completed hero's journey within A New Hope, with Luke being on Tatooine, leaving Tatooine, meeting Obi-Wan, having his conflict, and bringing about the end of the Death Star, receiving his medal at the end. Yes, you were introduced to Chewbacca and Han Solo and Princess Leia and other characters as well, but George Lucas did not know if he was going to get his sequels. He did not know if he was going to get 5 and 6, because as we all know, he wrote Star Wars and then had to break it down so that he could get at least one film made. So he had to do a almost completed journey within the first film to get, if he didn't get the rest of it done, he could at least have his story. That then branched out, of course, so Luke's journey then continued in 5 and 6, but kind of took his end point and springboarded it to make the journey longer. But I do like how in episode 4, he does have almost that completed journey.
Yeah.
It's something I think that they had to kind of lay out. You just said, like, it had to be beginning, middle, and end. They couldn't kind of get you partway through this and go, well, now we're stopping. If we don't get another episode of this, you kind of cut off the hero's journey itself, the circle that you see. And I'm just going to bring it back up, sorry, just for while I'm talking a little bit there. So, I mean, it covers so much in a few points to get you from your starting point back to technically your starting point, but you're in a newer place in your starting point. So you're back at the beginning of the journey, but the same feeling for the character. He could be back in the same place, so like it could be back at Tatooine, but the feeling that the characters move on so far, even though they arrive back at the beginning of the circle on there. I just think Luke was such a good kind of one to start this with, because he makes such a big journey. And that's in the first film. For him to then arrive back on Tatooine in Jedi, but to be this not even being really the same character anymore. He's moved on so far with the training that he's had and the adventures that he's had through Empire. I think it works really well. The hero's journey fits so well to Luke.
Indeed, not only that, jumping forward even to the sequels, his journey is finally completed by the time you get to episode 8 and episode 9. So his journey, if you really want to be ridiculously pedantic, of course, it starts in episode 3 because he's born right at the end of it, but his journey from 4 all the way through 9 is not only a completed hero's journey, but he's completed the cycle of it twice and then some. He's completed it from the young protagonist who doesn't know anything to the teacher and the mentor. So he's introduced to someone else's hero's journey as well. So he's the complete journey from start to finish and in someone else's journey, which is one of the reasons why I absolutely adore Luke, and why after watching The Last Jedi quite a few times and then watching episode 9, I love Luke's journey, especially in episode 8. I love his character in that. Now that I've seen it and seen the story in total compared to as the narrow-minded way we saw it when it very first came out, much better from many viewings afterwards.
I mean, we've mentioned the circle, we mentioned how it does repeat itself. Episode 4 does the entire thing once, right? And then it does it again across 5 and 6. And then it does it again between 6 and 7 and finishing with 9. He has essentially 3 journeys in 5 films, 6 films, however you want to say it. And, you know, we're not going to get sort of pedantic in this is this is that. But Luke is the prime example. As we've mentioned Rey, we've mentioned Anakin. We are going to go into them. We're going to be mainly talking about these 3. Obviously, we will mention other names at certain points. But I think the fair way to start off is it's really hard to say we're going to talk about it and just not like read Star Wars the film. Like you want to know how Star Wars starts. So
yeah.
Let's go into some basics. So obviously, go to episode 4. He's stuck on Tatooine, and a big thing is they call it the threshold, where he's basically met this mentor, and we're at the point where Obi-Wan has spoke to him. You know, he's had his talk, then he's had the Sand Course, and really Luke's arc begins in the iconic scene with his Uncle Auntie dying, quite drastically, burnt, crispy, however you want to say it. But it's that moment, and what goes with Star Wars, as we always say, is John Williams. It adds so much more to every scene that there is John Williams is involved in the franchise. It just adds more. And again, like I'm trying to do this as more of a just talking about Luke more so than a theory, but that moment's the beginning of his journey. It's not him getting power converted. It's not him picking up R2. It's the moment they die. He's like, okay, now I can join the rebellion. That's really where his character kickstarts. And obviously, you know, we always say Han Solo is maybe the cooler one in episode 4. I think obviously even like Hamill's gone on record say, you know, Luke was very goofy. And you can talk about this hero journey and you look at how, again, go to the opening scenes of episode 6, how matured he is. He's a Jedi Knight. He's wise. He's trained. That's not power converters, you know.
No.
And it goes into so much, and it's really hard to discuss this. I'm sorry. It's just hard about not making it sound like an essay and boring everyone to sleep.
Yeah.
But I think a big thing is it early to jump into episode 5? Because I really think this kicks off in Empire Strikes Back. So you get Star Wars, which kickstarted everything. Obviously, episode 5 is the game changer. We spoke about it last week. If you didn't check out our video, do that. And I never really looked into this stuff till my old lecturer at uni basically was saying how much of Empire Strikes Back. I think I mentioned this last week, that he spoke to me to have a look into the hero's journey, then look at Luke Skywalker. So what we spoke about was the big revelation in that film is obviously Vader being his dad, but it doesn't affect Luke's journey at that point because you've had the build-up of his journey that just added to it. And when you bring into this, the big moment of this is challenging temptations. I think that's a big thing because we've got a lot to say for Luke, a lot more to say for Anakin, and a decent amount to say for Rey when it comes to the challenging temptation. So just saying that out loud, what do you guys think the biggest stuff is for Luke that leads on to something bigger without giving it away too much?
Well, I think to start off, and a point that I will come back to because I find it very interesting with Rey more so, and also Anakin, but to a lesser extent, is the refusal part, where he is given this choice. He says, you must, if you're to save the princess, you must come with me to Alderaan. He goes, well, I can't come to Alderaan. I've got farming to do. I have, moisture evaporators to go and check on. I can't leave. He's been given his father's weapon. He's been given the choice. This is the path that's been laid before you, and he has refused that journey. But that springboard, then when he goes and sees his aunt and uncle, well, their remains, and goes, okay, now I have nothing else here. I will go on this journey with you. So for me, that's probably the biggest point of all. As something that's mirrored. When we get to Rey, I'm going to come back to this point because Rey's journey mirrors that very much so. And it's a very key beat in that hero's journey is here is the quest, here is the refusal, then it's the jumping off point to, okay, now I have no choice, or the choice has always been made for him. Let's go forward with that.
I think with Luke as well, there's you say the challenges and temptations. I think there's always that side of Luke inside. I think Filoni mentioned it as well in the gallery, where he always felt like Luke could turn to the dark side. You knew it would be the wrong choice for him, but there was always that chance that he would. That the challenge of being, once he knew Vader was his father, and while it's not that outright sort of, yeah, because to be dad, I'll go straight over there. I think the pull and the lure of that side was a massive piece of that. That he knew there was power out there in the universe that maybe that he wasn't being offered when he had. Left Dagobah because his frustration with how he couldn't save his friends. I think that says more about Yoda hadn't quite moved on from the Jedi of old that he used to know before he moved to Dagobah. He's still kind of in that old Jedi mindset at that point still. And I think the challenge is kind of Luke is not looking for maybe an easier path, which we know leads to the dark side, but he certainly isn't as sold on everything Yoda's telling him, especially when he has to leave his friends in danger. So I think there are a lot of challenges still for Luke to get past in order for him to get to where he needs to be.
Indeed, but going back to Dagobah, that is nowhere more prevalent than for Luke's challenges and temptations. And of course, when he goes into the cave, when he faces his version of Vader, which his fear is that it's himself. That very much psychological and physiological challenge of Vader, but that fear, that very real fear that's who he could become. That's his temptation. Is his fear is this is where I could go. This is who it could become. This is what I could be. And he doesn't want that. He wants to do the complete opposite, of course. This is before he finds out who Vader really is. But he already has that pull. He goes into the cave because he wants to. He feels something in it. That's his temptation. And of course, then later on, when it comes to Return of the Jedi, one of my favorite moments is when the Emperor baits him into taking his lightsaber and going to strike the Emperor down, because that is his real temptation. He is very close to that point, and Filoni said this one in the gallery, that Luke at this point could have been turned. He actually does use his anger and his aggression, and at the last moment he realizes this moment and throws his lightsaber away to go, no, I will not go down that path. He makes his choice, but it's taken not only 3 films, but it's taken a full cycle and a half of the journey effectively to get to that point where he has made his choice once and for all. And not only that, jumping them forward to the sequel trilogy, and to also go back to Star Wars, if you want to go watch my video on Kylo Ren and Ben Solo, his journey, is that when Luke is faced with Kylo, with Ben at that point, he doesn't know what to do. He is stricken, and he has another challenge and another temptation, the temptation to turn to the dark side to kill his nephew. And he almost goes through with it as well. Luke is a very human character. And one of the reasons why I love him is because these temptations are placed before him and he crumbles. He doesn't always succeed. He fails at some points because at the end of the day, he is only human. And in the most Star Wars way, he's the most human personified.
Yeah, and I think that's why we don't find him boring, but the average person, certainly when I was younger, Luke wasn't my favorite. It's obviously he was to many people. I'm not taking away from anybody at all. But compared to Han, look, he's the cocky, fun one. Leia's the princess. Chewbacca's the hairy one. You've got the funny droids, and it's a very similar thing. You look at the hero's journey across many franchises, Harry Potter to name one. The protagonists are often the most boring because this is more getting to the Rey stuff. I don't find Rey boring before someone cries. I really like Rey. Because it's been done so long over the 40 years, especially cinema, because this big franchise, certainly many films did it way before Star Wars, but this was the biggest film in history. And it set the standards where everyone chose to copy the genre for the following 10 years. Then the prequels came out. Then Marvel happened. And then you got Disney. There's been this domination era where the hero's journey has been a thing. And I think with Luke, it's only as I grew a bit older, and certainly without diving into episode 8 yet, that just added so much more to him. And You spoke about the moment at Return of the Jedi. To me, that's not just that's the greatest moment in Star Wars history, because it's the comic of him refusing to kill his dad. And you spot on to mention Filoni, because I always think this, and not to get into a Last Jedi debate as usual. So many people say, "Oh, we hate what they did with Luke." That's because they just put Luke in the film halfway through a hero's journey in Episode 8. He's had his death and rebirth, abyss, whatever we want to call it. Luke is not ready, and by the end of that film, boosted again in 9, he is, as he finishes his arc as it very much began, which obviously was between at the end of Episode 6, the fully fledged Jedi Knight, and you talk about the journey with him, and you've got all these people, and he's the hero. He is the hero of this franchise. He saves his dad. Granted, he dies, but he redeems him without, as the Emperor says in 9, he was saved by his family, and that was what overthrew the Empire, was a family connection. And obviously, then Palpatine says, you're my granddaughter, you can't kill me. But I just think with Luke that the story is not just stronger, but it's the traditional storytelling. I think that's also because when he's being written in the 70s and 80s, George Lucas has been researching this for a long time. He can write the perfect hero antidote, and that can work. Whereas you get to the other ones, certainly Anakin and Rey, you can't have a carbon copy of Luke Skywalker because he's already the hero. Now, the Chosen One's a different discussion, but very much the Chosen One's got a similar process. But the hero himself, Luke Skywalker, he can't just turn up, kill people. He's not Optimus Prime. He can't just win every time. He needed to lose, and that's what Empire did that separated it. He didn't just lose, because they lose in Hoth. He loses his hands. He loses his ham. Didn't mean to make a really bad joke. And obviously, he then gets the revelation about his father. And, I think I said last week, imagine waiting for 3 years, because people didn't believe it. It was that big a twist. People did not believe it. No. This day and age, leaks here, there, everywhere. It's just incredible, but that built up Luke's journey more, that you had the time between where Lucas could tinker with things, and he always says it's like poetry, it rhymes, because that is a fundamental thing that the hero journey does. And I don't know if I've glossed over too much with Luke, but I'm just going to ask you.
It's not glossing over. It's more the point that we have a short amount of time. We're kind of try and concise it. But
what would you two say is the defining point in Luke's, like theory aside, all that stuff? What's the most defining moment of Luke Skywalker as a hero?
Weirdly now, with the saga as a whole, I think his return in Episode 9 is this massive turning point for where we get Luke as the Jedi he probably expected to be, or where he was headed after, between Jedi and Force Awakens, where we saw him and he was starting to build the Jedi temples and trying to train a new piece of Jedi, but where he's living under this whole legend guise that he maybe got a bit above himself. I think when we get to him and Rey finds him on Act 2 again, or in Rise of Skywalker, I think you're back to the best version of Luke, that he's wise and he's older, but he's got some of that Yoda and a bit of Ben about him as well, where he's grown so much and he knows now exactly his place and where he should have been. He realizes what he did wasn't the right way to go about it, but he comes this really massive full circle to become the man he wanted to be, even after he's back with the Force.
Yeah, and I agree. That's Luke at his best. It's not my personal favorite. I still would go back to Return of the Jedi in his final arc and that final piece where he throws his lightsaber away and says, "I'm a Jedi like my father before me." That will forever still be my favorite Star Wars moment. But Luke at his best is still, I agree, now that Saga is complete, is Episode 9, where everything for his character comes full circle. And in my opinion, he's probably the most complete character in Star Wars, arguably, because of that journey across 4 through 9, and because of the other characters he interacts with, and just how he goes from being the hero to being the mentor, and going through every role that is possible in the hero's journey. And I think we're going to jump off that from probably the most successful character in the hero's journey to the one that failed, but the chosen one of the saga, and talk about Anakin Skywalker. Now, Anakin Skywalker, of course, as we know, does, by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, end up completing the hero's journey, but he goes about it in such a way that, can you really call him a hero? That's the question.
And that's a great question to ask, because you look at the Clone Wars and he's this hero, and then you go to A New Hope and Obi-Wan's like, he was a cunning warrior, he was a good friend. You still don't have the revelation, but Anakin Skywalker has a hero's acknowledgement from the first moments of Episode 4 when we don't know who he is. What does Uncle Owen say? Your father was like a pilot in a cargo ship or something.
He was
like
a space freighter pilot, yeah.
Yeah, and Obi was like, nope, he was a Jedi Knight. And you've already got an image in your head built up. And obviously, jump forward many years to Episode 1 being released in cinemas, and look at little kid Anakin Skywalker. He's a slave that lives at home with his mum, and he's took away by a random Jedi he just met that definitely isn't apparently his father, who could be, called Qui-Gon Jinn. And then he goes on his journey that he follows them to Coruscant. Jump ahead to the end of Episode 101, I'm going to train you, you will be a Jedi, I promise you. Then the big thing with Anakin is that he has a lot of this stuff happen in 1, but obviously we all know it's a prequel. It has to finish for Episode 4 to begin. And the whole story of the prequels is Anakin's fall from grace. Now, granted, Attack of the Clones, I think we all love it deep down. But it doesn't have its moments, and I think Anakin ultimately is one of the weakest parts of that film. I've always said it was a necessary intervention, that they need him to have the romance to have the impact for Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, we literally get, here is hero Anakin at the start of Episode 3. You want to start your adventure? You're already on it, mate. You're on a space battle in Coruscant. You want your guardian, your person giving you knowledge? You got 2, Palpatine and Kenobi. Because they're the only 2 people guiding Anakin, not Padme. She's pregnant. He's already got his issues. But Anakin's entire story arc in that is so simple, and this is where he fails. It's the part here, challenges and temptations. It's essentially a quarter of the journey, and that is where Anakin Skywalker fails. Obi-Wan says it to Luke, you'll be tempted by the dark side of the Force. It's written there, it's a temptation, and Anakin was tempted, and Obi-Wan will also say he was seduced, but the reality is he was mugged off by Palpatine.
The truth of that, true. The truth of the matter is he was doomed to fail from the start. He was created by the Force by Palpatine using the Force to be Vader from the start. He was always doomed to fail, and when you meet him in Episode 1, he already has too many flaws. So that by the time you get to Episode 3, he is at the point of he's finished his hero's journey, but the fall to the dark side is yet to come. And he gets to his crossroads, being the moment between Mace Windu and Emperor Palpatine, well, Chancellor Palpatine at this point. And the worst part of that fact is because Mace Windu has doubted him his entire life, because he's never given him the trust, even at that moment, that pivotal road, that crossroads just before that, when he tells him, he confides in him, he goes to him for that one final layer of trust. And Mace Windu says to him, if this is true, you will have earned my trust. So when he gets there, he goes, Mace is pleading with him. He goes, well, you haven't given me that trust to be able to believe in you, and I'm sorry, but the person who has believed in me is the one that is appearing to fail at this moment. So Anakin was always doomed to fail. And when you go back and watch the Clone Wars, there are certain moments when, for example, when you have Obi-Wan and Duchess Satine with the Prime Minister Almec, he's going, well, who are you going to choose here? And Anakin kills him from behind. Obi-Wan goes, oh, Anakin. He goes, well, he's going to blow up the ship, because he makes that choice. In his mind, he doesn't feel he's doing wrong. He's just taking the easiest choice for the right steps. But again, that dooms him to fail from the moment he has begun. And that's why, although his journey is flawed, it's just as equally fascinating to me.
And Clone Wars is a really good point. Sorry, Dave, just to really jump in. When you mentioned Kenobi, you get Duchess Satine, who Kenobi was tempted, but he never went with it. And yes, that's more of a Jedi journey than a hero journey as such. But it's always the comparison to Anakin that we know he's going to fail. But it's how can you build him up to the level that Obi-Wan speaks about him in A New Hope, to then drop him down into how on earth did all that go to stuff to end up being Darth Vader. That kind of makes sense.
Indeed, Dave.
I was just going to say, I mean, you look at Anakin's, looking back at this hero's journey, and you kind of don't you're not able to really get past the challenges and temptations for Anakin. No matter how far he tries to move on, he trips back to that step almost every time. He leaves his mother, is pining for his mother. His mother dies. He wants to move forward. He's got Padme. Padme is pregnant with his child, but he also sees that she's going to die. It's just the Jedi don't trust him, won't give him the place of power that he wants, and he's not rising in the ranks enough. He doesn't feel Obi-Wan's the right teacher. He's got this point where he can't get past to move to keep him as the hero to go all the way through. He needed to get through that really smoothly, but everything he does draws him back to another challenge and temptation, and it's the challenges that are inside of that lead to Palpatine just being able to just literally like slide into his DMs, just like literally slides on in. With, have you ever heard about this guy, Darth Plagueis? I don't know if you've heard. Bit of a tale to tell you. Classic sliding into DMs. Yeah, it's because of this, just he can't get past those challenges. Had he not had those, he probably would have had very much like a Luke path where he would have guided through, saved the Clone Wars, and being the Jedi he wanted to be. But because he could not let go of literally couldn't let go of anything, he fails at that point. He cannot move around. I mean, it goes past this, obviously his death and rebirth, where he gets to become Vader, and he does that, but he's still, that gets his transformation as well, but he still never gets to that point of a full circle and a full hero's journey, because he only gets that moment at the end of Return of the Jedi, and it's a very brief moment before he dies. Yes, he gets it, but for me, that's the only reason I could not class him as a hero. He needed to be able to get past the challenges set before him, and he just couldn't.
Indeed, the very first challenge that was set before him was Qui-Gon's death, and he couldn't really get past that. It was a case of here is your savior, here is your mentor, here is the person that has rescued you from slavery, believed in you, given you opportunity, and before you've even begun the journey of training with them, they've been taken away from you.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing with Anakin. It's like he's doomed to fail, and you're absolutely spot on with the Return of Jedi stuff with Vader, Anakin, and it's a redemption, but it's not a everything's hunky-dory. It's literally he stayed in the middle bottom sector, the abyss, the revelation point for what 24 years between episodes 3 and 6, and literally 5 seconds he hasn't returned as the hero. He's redeemed himself. He saved his son, but ultimately it's Luke's journey as the hero that brings that about Anakin as well. It's everything. Lucas knew exactly what he had to do to write Anakin, and the story of Anakin's interesting. I absolutely despise Shakespeare, but it's that term, that the sort of Shakespearean tragedy. That's the entire story arc of Anakin Skywalker. He was written to fail because he wasn't really written as a fully fledged character until the prequels came out. And they've always had the teasers, the hints, even jumping the Clone Wars. Whenever he does something nasty, you'll always hear a very precise note of the Imperial March of what's to come. Don't worry, guys, he is going to turn one day. Imagine being the person that's never watched it and just gets to watch it fully in canon, like 1 through to 6, including Clone Wars. It'd be incredible. But Anakin's doomed to fail. I think that's where the comparisons come in, because he is still the hero of that trilogy. Phantom Menace, he's the hero. He's the kid. It's the kids' films. I was 3 years old. He was the coolest guy in the world. He's who you wanted to, not be, but that was who you looked up to. You didn't look up to Obi-Wan. You loved Qui-Gon Jinn, but he was like a dad. And we all know the story that he likely would have been Anakin's dad if he hadn't died. Probably adopted him, probably saved Shmi. And Carl's just said this. For instance, in his speech, he also lost the only father figure he had. Obi-Wan was reluctant. This, again, is what Dave mentioned. Obi-Wan's reluctance taken. Straight away, he compared him to a piece of dirt. No intention. It's just he's doing Qui-Gon's wishes to take him forward. And, I always forget. And this is
the thing. Obi-Wan says it himself. I love you and my brother, Anakin. He was never the father figure. He treats him as equal, not as the mentor and mentee. And that was one of the downfalls of Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationships.
And you got to think, in Phantom Menace, he's like 9 years old, and he's sat on the Jedi Council, and they say, no, we won't train you. He stood there. It took me years to clock on he was stood there, because it's not something you'd say in front of a 9-year-old kid.
No.
And they're going to be the guys that teach me everything, and they just said no, and we're get out. He doesn't forget stuff like that. And like I said, it's Anakin's journey to the dark side. He's the anti-hero's journey, but it's the build-up to stay stagnant with that part. And I think that's where Anakin has this different dynamic, and because he is a hero. You watch Clone Wars, he's the hero. He's the hero across the prequels, but it's that it needs to happen. And to make a villain better, you build him up as good a hero as he can be, so he's full from grace. You know, it's not like he was miserable. If he had been like a 9-year-old kid, like, you know, Harry Potter, they always show Voldemort as like an 8-year-old, and he's got like the Tobey Maguire emo fringe. He's already like bullied people, doing really bad things. There's no like, it's just okay. He's a rotten egg. He's gonna end up being the villain. He's not ever gonna do anything. By Star Wars having let's just build him up to then rip him apart. That has a far bigger impact. But then that also makes Luke's journey even better, because Luke has to get the person that has gone through all of this and convert him back to the light whilst doing his own journey. So they go hand in hand with each other, father-son dynamic.
Yeah, indeed. And with this is the thing with Anakin, what I like is the fact that when we're looking specifically at the hero's journey, he doesn't have a hero's journey, yet he is the hero. But everyone else does. Anakin does, so Luke does, and so does Rey. We're going to get onto Rey in a few minutes' time. But with Anakin, he gets stuck, as you said, very much in the challenges and temptations, and in the revelation and the abyss part of the journey. And he gets to atonement, but he never returns. He never goes back to fully being the hero, because he never was supposed to be the hero. He's supposed to be the chosen one, but not the hero. And that's one of the pieces when you get to episode 3, when he goes, you were the chosen one. You're supposed to bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. Well, no. He did bring balance to the Force. There are now only a handful of Jedi and 2 Sith. He brought balance, but not in the way that everyone thought he would or wanted him to, which is why, again, although he is the hero, it's not a hero's journey. It's a very flawed journey from start to finish. And when you get to episode 6, yes, again, he has atoned, per se, was returning to the light side of the Force, but he hasn't made up for all of the darkness he's done in the past 24 years. He has just returned to the light. He hasn't completed a hero's journey, but that's why he's one of the most fascinating characters to look at in this specific dynamic.
No, definitely.
And from that, we're going to jump into Rey, because Rey is a very interesting point in this story arc. Now, Luke is 4 through 9. Anakin, of course, 1 through 3, but you have Clone Wars as well. Rey specifically is to the sequel trilogy. But her journey, the interesting part here is when you had episode 4, as I said at the top of the program, episode 4 was its own story in its own way, because Lucas didn't know if he was going to get a sequel. And this is what we'll talk about, George, when you mentioned earlier about the way that cinema has changed. When you got to episodes 1, 2, and 3, Lucas already knew he had 1, 2, and 3 in the bag. He knew he had a story to tell. He could take 3 films to tell it. When you get to Rey, now the interesting part, of course, different writers, 3 different films, 1 journey. But you knew when you got to 7 that the journey didn't have to be completed in one go. You were left at certain story beats. So her story, although told across 3 films, actually is told in a much wider range than Luke's was in the original trilogy, when you had episode 4 and then 5 and 6, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. We all knew it was a trilogy, and the problem with it being a sequel trilogy to the biggest trilogy in history is the comparisons. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lament the plot of 7. I really enjoy 7. Yes, we know it's episode 4 again. And we've got the desert planet at the start. We have Rey's course adventure. She stumbles across a droid of the plans to the Death Star. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the plot. You know where exactly that goes. And it's all about the journey off Jakku. But this time it's I won't leave because I've got family waiting for me. It's not a challenge. It's no temptation. It's nothing. It's literally, I just won't go because I'm just, it's more denial that no one's going to take it. But again, we know this is going to be 3 films. And obviously go back to 2015. And I mean, I think we all deep down assumed Rey would be the Jedi, but obviously they chucked Finn in with the lightsaber in marketing to try and, I think, throw a couple of people off, which did work very well. And we've got the great scene in the snow. But Rey's journeys, it's not as traditional as the rest of the other 2, because, as I said, cinema's changed. New Hope was 77. This is 2015. This is almost 40 years later. And, you know, yes, comics are around in 1977, but you didn't have like 15 Marvel films in one Marvel franchise, let alone, you know, Spider-Man, Batman times, how many have there been? 3, 2 of them now, different Batman. All of cinema has had this. And when you get these big films, it was always the origin first. Look at Spider-Man 1 from 2002. Look at Iron Man. Look at Hulk. Look at Captain America. Look at Thor. Every single person who you've seen leading these franchises in their first film has the entire hero's journey and it's done. And the problem with Star Wars is that you need to put it over 3, but you can't follow book, because if you copy the book, then it's literally, we've already got the compared to episode 4, you stole the plot rumors, and this was a case of we can't copy it again because then it looked like you're stealing Luke's character arc. And obviously, jump forward to episode 8. The big question going into Last Jedi was, is she Luke's daughter? Whose daughter is she? Whose daughter is she? Oh my god, it's going to be so much like Empire Strikes Back, because we're going to find out in a big plot twist who her father is. It's so blatantly Luke. This, that, the other, it's all the same. And let's just throw you all off straight away. The temptation was never the dark side. At this point, the temptation wasn't the dark side. There wasn't this big revelation to copy 5. Episode 8 was the moment where it goes, okay, this is a bit different. She offered the villain to come to the light. Probably a film earlier than we all expected. And Rey just has a different journey. Unfortunately, some people want to shut the Mary Sue comments in, which is ridiculous because I'm not even going to get into it. It's just pathetic. Because you can't. Luke's is more traditional than the Mary Sue comment is, but no one's allowed to talk about that because you're not allowed to say stuff about the original trilogy. Anyway, episode 8 took on a new path. And without getting into opinions on 9, politely put, because there were 2 very different creative people that did 7, 9, and then obviously Ryan on 8. JJ did 7 and 9, Ryan 8. They all clearly had different ideas for what they wanted to do, not just with the trilogy, but for the characters of Rey. Now, the best thing I'll say about Ryan is that he took the film from the traditional Star Wars. Here's your 3 heroes and 1 villain. We had it in every trilogy. 3 heroes and, well, obviously prequels, villain each film. And episode 7 is very much, here's 3 heroes and here's your villain. And episode 8 went, no, not middle finger up. Episode 8 was, how about 1 main hero and 1 villain? And the story is going to be about those 2 together. Because, that's so different to the original hero's journey. The hero is not meant to be best mates with the villain in the middle chapter. They're not meant to ask them to come to the light. They're not meant to fight with them on their team. This took it to a whole different ballgame. And that's what put Rey on a different path, was the revelation that she is a nobody. And obviously jumping to episode 9 now, it's JJ comes on board, and not to I really like JJ. I think he's a fantastic director. Obviously, I dislike 9, which is fine. I've got no issue with anyone that likes it. You 2 love it. I've seen it 4 times still. I still went and put money into it. And 9 was just, okay, drop the Palpatine revelation, and then we're going to drop the temptations in. Because obviously when she finds out he killed my parents, I'm one of his, I need to now go and kill him. Also, well, it was hide first, wasn't it? First it was hide, do what Luke did. Again, the anti-hero journey. Then it was, okay, I'm going to confront him but kill him. And that's also, it's kind of a
But at that point, though, was the merger of the old hero's journey and the new hero's journey. Yes,
exactly. And 9 took it to a different direction. And to its credit, from Rey across, more so 8 and 9, because I will say I adore episode 7. Episode 7 was probably the safest film in history for the right reasons. People were still wounded over the prequels in 2013 when they started writing it. People were not happy. They wouldn't have wanted prequel mentions. Everything had to be original trilogy this, original trilogy that. We all hate the prequels. Can't have anything prequels in here. Get the X-Wings in. Get these in. Get these in. People wanted that. People can deny it now, but that's as everyone says, is what you wanted. Look at the first episode of Star Wars Rebels. Sound effects, everything. It's only really been, I'd say, the last 2 years since the prequels have become worldwide accepted. I think there was always the fans, there was always the generation, but I don't think you had the complete acceptance there now. And now you've got Hasbro pumping out action figures and stuff like that, but the idea of the prequels put a very different opinion onto setting up this new trilogy. Certainly with 7. That's why I think Rey, I'm not saying she has a stale moment in episode 7, because certainly, episode 7 ends with her going off to find a new mentor. Yes, we kind of get a little bit of it in 7 with her and Han Solo. He takes her away. She kind of wants him as a father figure. And then at the end of it is, I need to find Luke to become a Jedi. You don't really get that in the other Star Wars films, but what you do get is obviously the brilliant line of Kylo Ren is, do you want him to be your father too, or something like that? And Rey's dynamic comes in with Kylo, and they bounce off each other to complete the hero journey. Now, I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about Ben Solo / Kylo Ren. I'm gonna steal the limelight first. That's when I was supposed to talk about Rey, because I've been talking for ages.
Yeah, well, the thing I'll say about Rey is I wanted to compare Luke and Rey for this very specific reason. Her journey, although it is a hero's journey, is the atypical hero's journey. In episode 7, yes, it's a very similar outlook to episode 4, with the fact that she was given a lightsaber, she refused, she didn't want it. By the end of it, she accepted her place as this Jedi, this hero, but as very much the unwilling recipient of that power. By the time you get to 8, she's very confused. She doesn't know what she wants or where she wants to be. That's why she goes to find Luke and talk to him and go, look, I need someone to show me my place and all this, and why she's very disheartened that Luke turns her away. He goes, no, I refuse to train you, which was one of his biggest faults in episode 8. But by the time he realizes that and you get to episode 9, his journey then completes. Her journey, when she then gets interlinked with Ben, then becomes that dyad and the Force, that opposite side. And the hero's journey then, as it takes us atypical form, as you said, where she tries to entice the villain from the dark to the light. So she tries to help complete his hero's journey, because she doesn't know what she wants to do with her own. By the time you get to 9, she does realize the completion of her journey. By the end of it, she then goes, when she says the words, I'm Rey Skywalker, that's because she has chosen her own path. She has seen what she wants in the galaxy, and she's chosen the name because she doesn't want to be just because she doesn't want to associate with Palpatine, but because she wants to infuse the galaxy with the light that it once had. You go, this is the way forward. I am burying the past. Here's the new. But I'm taking the best part of that past and passing it on so that everyone knows the true legend. As Luke said, he didn't want to be a legend. By the time he was caught up in the legend, it was too late. He had too much hubris and too much of his own vigor and was too big. So then that's why he ran away. Rey took that lesson, learned from it, and now wants to implement that in a different way. But yes, George, go for it.
So Ben Solo, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there as well. They work hand in hand with one another. We don't know his hero's journey. Obviously, we know bits of it through the Rise of Kylo Ren comics, but the closest thing we get is the Han Solo Ben line in episode 7. That's when they start to fledge him as a character. Then we get the incredible scene on the bridge of, I don't have the strength to do it, the death. That builds him up. Then episode 8, how do you make this really fragile person? Because obviously, Adam Driver's interviews, the goal of Kylo Ren was that he was Ben Solo, like he believed in the character. And episode 8, again, what I mentioned with Rey, it just took Kylo to another level. That's the film where you guys know Adam Driver's my favorite actor. That's the film I was like, oh wow, like this guy is, in the politest way, a lot better than Star Wars. And I don't mean that to sound film snob or anything. I was like, that's one that's going to go on to big things. Didn't expect him to get 2 Oscar nominations in the 3 years that followed.
But Harrison Ford did the same, of course, in the
Indiana Jones
trilogy. Yeah,
exactly, and that was between 5 and 6. That's why obviously we have the classic ending of we don't know if he's coming back, because they didn't know, and you don't sign 3-pitch deals in 1980. Now with Kylo, again, it bounces off Rey. She's pulling him to the light, but he's always trying to pull her to the dark, and it's not as obvious as Palpatine. It's more that it's for his selfish own will, more so than you must join this evil sort of cultist thing. And even with their own duel and stuff in 9 and everything you get with Kylo, it all points to Ben Solo coming back. That was the question going into episode 9, is Ben Solo going to turn to the light? Now, obviously, you can bring up the dynamic of 8 set up as the big bad. How would you go from the big bad? Because Vader in episode 5, he's already been Tarkin's bitch. We've already had him kneeling down to his Emperor on a giant hologram in episode 5. And episode 6, just, stand to the right, please. Kill him, please. Vader's had them knockdowns, but Kylo was his own man when it got to the point, and he was the leader of the galaxy. But he never had it in him, and I think that's what they really tried to build upon. Maybe a bit too much at times they were trying to put that message across, but it humanized him, and it kind of puts him on a hero journey. I struggle with this because he's kind of a combination between Anakin and Rey. Obviously, it's his granddad, but I can't say he was ever fully a hero in that sense of we didn't have him established as a hero for when he does turn. He turns because he was used at a far younger age than obviously Anakin ever was. And it's very different paths. But where he ends up, when he, comes back for Rey, goes to fight Palpatine, even though he doesn't even actually get to fight him, kills his fellow knights who didn't do anything. But he has the hero journey, and it's the moment with Harrison Ford. No one expected the "Hey kid," and that's the moment where like Ben Solo has returned.
Well, there's a great line. Sorry, go on.
I think his is more of a Vader. I struggle to see as a redemption second moment, but Ben Solo is a fully fledged redemption storyline, and I don't think it finishes with him as the hero because he dies straight away.
Yeah, there's a great line in the Rise of Kylo Ren comics where he's talking to Vo, one of the other students, and he says, "Both the light and the dark claim me the moment I was born." And it's a very good line to kind of set up Kylo's entire arc, because he's being pulled from both sides. Little does he know by who and how, but his entire journey is split from the word go, and it's a very fascinating way to look at it. Dave?
I was going to kind of just chime in really with the same thing that with Rey. I feel, yes, she has her own hero's journey and she gets that over the 3 films, but I love how her hero journey is kind of entwined by almost trying to give Ben Solo his hero journey throughout that same thing. From the minute they touch tips in episode 8, I'll always love the touching tips scene. From that moment, that is him getting his own go at the hero's journey. I think you're right, he can't have it because of the character he became out of Kylo Ren. He can never have that full hero's journey, but to the as far a point as they can give it to him, over 8 and 9, they definitely redeemed him and maybe even brought him a bit further than Vader had, than Anakin had. I think he gets a much better sort of turn at almost showing that hero side. The fact he fights with Rey, that the whole we're standing together with our lightsabers together, rather than just being, I know, yes, he throws the Emperor down a big shaft, but I think it gives a better hero, a fully formed hero's journey to Ben as far as they can without labeling him a hero and giving him his redemption on there. But yeah, I love how that was more intertwined. Then you get Rey, yes, she's going to get her story. We knew she was going to get that, but to intertwine Ben with it, I thought was a really, really brave, and it makes the sequel series for me.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think with Ben as well, like the conversation people have, and not to again do the speculation, not to sound like I don't like 9 as much as it sounds like I do. No, I phrased that wrong. I don't dislike 9 as much as it sounds like I do. Would you guys? Here's like a double other question. Obviously, Ben comes out to the good. Would you guys had rather? Obviously, Rey died and she sacrificed herself. I'm curious because a question that gets thrown around a lot: would it have served the plot? And in Subjects of Tonight, both his and her journeys better if Rey had have died during that duel and Kylo had lived.
I believe so. I think it would.
Not to get into Reylo, none of that.
No. I know exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I agree. I really think it would have served the purpose better. I also think it would have maybe served it better if she had taken the temptation fully and turned, and then Kylo would come back and you would have had his journey as a completion, her journey as a failure, as opposed to hers being fully completed and his kind of being shoved to one side almost. Yes, he got redeemed, but then it was almost for what purpose? I love 9 for many reasons, but that is one of the points that I wish they could have just changed it. Because when she sees herself as the Empress and she sees herself as the Dark, she almost takes it. She almost goes, well, that's terrifying, but I kind of want to do it. And then she runs away because she doesn't want to turn, but she's very tempted because she thinks she might. That's why she runs. And of course, then Luke goes, what the hell do you think you're doing? And also treated this lightsaber with a lot more respect after the irony that he threw it away the last time. Yes, I agree with John Parton. Put a lovely comment there saying there's such things as a villain's journey. I think Palpatine wrote the book on it completely. George Lucas started it off, and I really think that JJ ended it beautifully in 9 in terms of take out how he came back. Ignore that fact. If you take Palpatine's journey from nothing to ultimate and unlimited power, and the amount of people he influenced to get to the point he was able to get to and stay at that level, it's incredible.
Sorry, Dave, I'll let you go first.
No, I know you struggle with the whole Palpatine returns thing, and I think it was something I struggled with as well when the first time I saw the film, it was a bit like, oh, okay, that's not quite the way I saw it. I kind of felt myself with my own reckoning of stories in my head and how it happened, and I think that helps sometimes with just your own sort of take on it, how it happened, and you don't need it to be written down yet. You don't need it to be canonized. But in my own head, I have a reason why Palpatine's still around and what's happened. So that kind of helps that side. And really just going back to what you were saying on Ben being the one who survived the film, I love the ending of the movie. I love that it's Rey, and I love the take of her giving the Skywalker name. I think we've taken a very different turn of the movie for Ben to have seen it through. I think it would have been interesting for him to then have actually taken on the Emperor. So obviously he said when he was destroyed, his spirit would leap into his next. That's why he wanted Rey there to jump into his next of kin. Ben wasn't that, so that would have been a really interesting take on what would have happened to the Emperor if it had been a different battle altogether. Who would have sent his spirit to Rey if she'd already been slain by that point, and that's when she rose up, and he would have to take out Rey himself as well after this journey of them being so close to him, then having to kill her. I think would have been probably the turn that would have taken, and I think would have been a very different movie for it. But yeah, I'm really happy that they did it the way they did, but it certainly throws up a lot of good questions.
Indeed, it's one of the reasons why we want to do this kind of new format and have these discussions so that we can talk about the theory and talk about the what ifs and talk about our opinions on Star Wars in ways that we haven't done so before. And as we always say, if you've got any comments or any feedback, just do leave them. We'll always read it, and we'll bring up the comments like John and Carl we've had this evening. Anyone else who wants to put anything on our Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, I'll go through all of our links at the end of the show, and of course you always find a description down below as well. But we wanted to try this new format to talk about these subjects in different ways, and the first one, of course, we are talking about now is the hero's journey. And I do think that as a nice way to tie it all up, if you look at Rey, Luke, and Anakin as the three main heroes that have a journey, yes, you have Luke's, which is from start to finish the pure hero's journey. You have Anakin's, which is the hero that fails, and Rey, the unwilling hero that succeeds. So you also, not only do you have the hero's journey, you have three versions of it, one either side and one straight down the middle. But also there are other characters within it as well. You look at Leia. Leia is a unwilling hero that was born into a role. She then, as a princess, she then decided to fight the Senate and fight for what was right with the rebellion. If you watch the Rebels, if you read Bloodline and books like that to then find out what happened to her in the in-between years from when she started in the Senate in Rebels during pre-episode 4, and her journey beyond that to go to the New Republic Senate, where she ends up as General of the Resistance. She's always been this unwilling hero at the start who then becomes the most willing hero of all, the one that wants to take this fight to the enemy, but also wants to be there for everyone else, to provide the galaxy with the best hope it can be. And her journey is very interesting because, of course, you don't know she's a Jedi until you get to episode 6, or at least Force sensitive to get to episode 6. Her training you can read about in Bloodline, and then you see it in episode 9, her actual training and her actual lightsaber. But the influence has always been there, and as soon as she knows, she always has this feeling anyway. Again, you find this out in episode 6, but that journey goes from the unwilling hero to the one that wants to do the best, and one that overall is the one in the background doing the bulk work. Han Solo, he really was the unwilling hero in Solo and his journey in the original trilogy, but by the time he gets to episode 7 and then his return to help Ben in episode 9, again is that journey of the supporting characters who play the biggest roles without sometimes really needing to. They play the story beats. Obi-Wan, the hero that fails, he's the one supposed to mentor Anakin, and he doesn't. He fails. He tries to mentor Luke and learns from his lessons, but even then he fails because Luke, although listens to him, still goes at the end of episode 5 and goes and fights Vader before he's ready. So there's so many interesting story beats throughout these journeys and these heroes, but of course the main three being Luke, Anakin, and Rey, being straight down the middle, one to the left, one to the right of the hero that fails and the hero that unwillingly succeeds. I think is a really cool way to look at Star Wars as a whole without necessarily going into the Sith and the Jedi.
No, definitely. I don't think I can say anything that can top that. I'm not going to lie. I was going to bring up the fact that we'd only spoken about the three primary protagonists. That there are many of the heroes in Star Wars, supporting roles, minor roles, other roles. There's so many of them, but those three are probably the biggest of them. And then obviously you get your other ones. Your Obi-Wan's probably the model Jedi Knight, I would say. Like, if you're going to write a textbook on the Jedi, who's like their like prize A-star student, definitely Obi-Wan Kenobi. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say. It's just the final one. Who would you think's got the best hero journey? Of the three we've discussed, I'm gonna say, obviously, it's very brown. It's Luke, but that's because of the tradition, and that's because of time is an ally of his. You get the originals, and then he's able to do it again in the sequels. Have those moments across both, so it's obviously an unfair comparison. But I do think of the three sticking to their main trilogy, I think Luke does have the strongest one. But that's also down to the fact that that universe was built around that trilogy was built around the theories that pre-existed it, that meant they could follow things by the book and make it the best thing possible.
Indeed, Dave.
I don't think you can look past Luke as the perfect version of the hero's journey. Rey's comes very close for me. I think her bringing of hope back to the galaxy, or the start of returning hope to the galaxy, as we leave 9, is very, very close to that. But yeah, you're right. I think because it was built so carefully around the hero's journey with Luke, that you can't really go past him.
3 for 3 is Luke for me. It really is. It's poetry in motion. It always is. And always is, as in motion the galaxy is with Luke. He is the ultimate. He is the straight down. If you're talking pure in the hero's journey, I mean, don't get me wrong. We've talked about our favorite characters and our favorite films and all the rest of it, and I've made no bones about it. Luke always has been and always probably will be my favorite character in Star Wars. But if you're talking purely along the hero's journey path, from point A to point B, and through his journey from episode 4 through the sequels as well, Luke is the ultimate iteration of that hero's journey. And again, thank you to anyone who has watched tonight. Leave a comment, give us feedback, let us know what you think of the new format, any subjects you want us to cover, any discussions you want us to have or be part of. You're more than welcome to talk to us here at Once the Force of Stars podcast, either on our social media or through our YouTube page, anything like that. Come talk to us, leave us a comment. We read all of them, we take everything on board. Drop us a message, we'll happily talk about it. And of course, if anyone else is out there who wants to do a collaboration or anything for any other podcast, we're more than happy to jump in any discussion anywhere, anytime, because, well, we love Star Wars and this is what we're here for. So until next time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Once the Force of Stars podcast, at The Force Podcast. You can find the video version on this later on our Facebook and YouTube pages, and of course the audio version will be up later on our Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. The merchandise will be found in our TeePublic store in the link down below. But until next time, we were Once the Force. May the Force be with you. Good night.